BTS News Today. Jungkook molestation case third trial. Video evidence reveals atrocities. 4 defendants sentenced severely. Third trial in Jungkook abuse case. A soldier and a famous artist. It culminated with the introduction of shocking video evidence. The video clip shows the physical and verbal abuse he suffered in a military barracks. 3 soldiers were seen performing the brutal action, while a captain stood by without intervening. This tape became the key evidence that changed the course of the trial. Video evidence that shook the court. The video footage was played in the courtroom in a tense atmosphere. In the video, Jungkook is seen being abused by the 3 accused, while the captain, who has the authority to stop the violence, chooses to remain silent. The expressions of the audience in court went from surprise to anger when they saw the footage, which gives a real picture of the violence that is often hidden in the military environment. Prosecutors also presented additional evidence, including an internal military report and testimony from a psychologist detailing the long-term trauma Jungkook suffered as a result of the incident. This violence not only leaves physical injuries, but also destroys the mental state of the victim. The psychologist before the judge. Weakened defense. The defense team tried to discredit the evidence by claiming that the footage was taken out of context. However, additional evidence and the consistency of eyewitness testimony strengthened the position of the prosecutor. The judge ruled that there was no reason that could justify the violent act that took place. After considering all the evidence and testimony, the court found all 4 defendants guilty. The 3 soldiers who committed the violence were each sentenced to 6 years in prison. Meanwhile, the captain, who was considered negligent and failed to carry out his responsibilities as a leader, was sentenced to a more severe sentence, namely 10 years in prison. The judge stated in his ruling, acts of violence in any form cannot be tolerated, especially in an environment that should uphold the value of discipline and protection between members. Impact of the case. This case has attracted public attention, both from Jungkook's fans and the general public, who highlighted the culture of violence within the military institution. Many hope the verdict is the starting point for systemic change to prevent similar violence in the future. Although justice has been served, Jungkook's recovery journey is expected to be long. However, he received widespread support from fans and colleagues, which continues to encourage him to rise from the trauma he experienced. The third trial of Jungkook's persecution case, exposing violence in the military and its effects. Case background. From fame to nightmare. Jungkook, known as one of the biggest K-pop groups in the world, he is serving in the military like any other South Korean citizen. As a publicly known figure, many considered his military duties to be in full swing. However, this sticking case unravels a dark side of military life that is rarely revealed. The violence against Jungkook took place in one of the military barracks in the middle of last year. Initially, reports of the incident only surfaced in internal circles. However, after Jungkook was treated for serious injuries, the case began to attract public attention. As the details of his case came to light, different layers of society began to highlight the culture of violence and the strict hierarchy in military institutions. A stressful trial. The third trial became the most critical moment. Prosecutors presented video footage showing the 3 soldiers committing violence against Jungkook. The video shows horrific scenes. Jungkook is beaten, insulted, and verbally abused. All of that was done in front of a captain who just stood by without taking any action. Silence filled the courtroom as the video was played. The public, including victims, families, and anti-violence activists, are disgusted and angry. Even some members of the court looked emotional. This is not just physical abuse, but a betrayal of military values. Prosecutor in his statement, culture of violence in the South Korean military. The case opens a broader discussion about the culture of violence within military institutions. Strict hierarchies often create an environment in which violence is perceived as a means to enforce discipline. Unfortunately, many similar cases are never reported due to social pressure and threats of revenge. A former soldier who is now an anti-violence activist said, "What happened to Jungkook is just the tip of the iceberg." This kind of violence is common knowledge in the military, but rarely does anyone dare to report it. Psychological impact on Jungkook. Psychologists who testified at the hearing described the long-term impact Jungkook had. He has anxiety disorders, nightmares, and difficulty trusting others. This condition can affect his personal life, his career, and even his ability to lead a normal life, explains the psychologist. Many of Jungkook's fans and colleagues voiced their support on social media, sending messages of encouragement and hope for his recovery. Hashtags like #JusticeForJungkook and #EndMilitaryAbuse are trending globally, which shows how much support he has received on a verdict that gives hope the court ultimately found all 4 defendants guilty. The sentence of 6 years for the 3 soldiers of the offender and 10 years for the negligent captain was considered an important step in the fight for justice. This verdict is a clear message that violence will not be tolerated, even in closed institutions like the military, said a legal expert who followed the case. However, many question whether this punishment is enough to prevent similar events in the future. Some have demanded reforms in the structure of the military to ensure a safer environment for all soldiers. Public reaction and pressure for change the case sparked a wave of protests and petitions to end the culture of violence within the military. Human rights organizations are calling for reform of the violence reporting system and protection for whistleblowers, a South Korean lawmaker commented. This is an opportunity for us to reform an outdated system. We can no longer ignore the suffering of our soldiers. For Jungkook, recovery from this trauma takes time and support. Many entertainment industry observers worry that this experience could affect his return to the music scene. However, some fans believe that he will rise even stronger than before. I'm sure Jungkook will take this experience as a lesson to help others, said a fan. Jungkook's case highlights how strict hierarchies within the South Korean military often create an environment that favors violence and harassment. The military system in South Korea demands absolute obedience from subordinates to superiors, which is often abused. In many cases, acts of violence are considered a method of discipline, even though there are already legal regulations prohibiting it. According to the annual report of the National Human Rights Commission of Korea, NHRCK, violence in military barracks remains a difficult issue to address, especially since many cases go unreported. Strict hierarchies create a culture of fear, said a military analyst who did not want to be named. When someone reports violence, they often face exclusion or even further threats. This creates a vicious circle. The victims choose silence to protect themselves, while the perpetrator continues to commit violence without consequences. One of the most astonishing moments in the case was when videotaped evidence was introduced at the trial. According to the prosecutor's report, the video was secretly taken by another soldier who was at the scene. Initially, the footage was not handed over directly to authorities for fear of repercussions for the taker. However, after Jungkook suffered serious injuries and was transferred to a military hospital, and the soldier ventured to hand over the footage to a senior military official known as a reform supporter. From there, the evidence finally reached the prosecutor. This step is considered heroic, but it also exposes the great risks that whistleblowers face in a system like this. If the complainant had not stepped forward, perhaps the case would never have become public, said a human rights lawyer. Although the verdict has been handed down, Jungkook's journey to recover from the trauma is still long. According to the psychologist who dealt with her case, trauma from violence is often more difficult to heal than physical injuries. He faced not only the pain of violence, but also the betrayal of his own comrades, said the psychologist. In addition to anxiety disorders and nightmares, victims of violence in the military environment often find it difficult to return to trust the authorities or the system. This can impact their personal relationships, their professional lives, and even their long-term mental health.